So there's a dark patch. We can have something red and otherworldly. Let's look at green. That can work sometimes. Or pink, which is, whoa, this is too much. I'll switch from rocky to sandy. Let's see what we get from there. That's not too bad. I'm gonna shift the bias towards the right side. See if we can get just a bit more of that yellow going, because that is looking interesting. And again, it may feel weird because we are looking at this terrain from high up here and go like, whoa, that looks too planned out or something. But when you're, let me go here. So when you're down here, and whether it's a game or a VFX shot or whatever, so at the ground level, we don't really get to see the bigger picture. So this will start looking quite natural. So don't worry too much about that. Also don't worry too much about how they blend together, because it's a big concern from up here, not really from down here. So let me get back out here and see. So we have this patch here, and now our terrain is starting to take shape. So I'll save it again. And I will rename this to Combined Minerals. And let's add a bit of vegetation like we talked about before. So it's quite easy. We can do it manually, but if you just want Gaea to take care of it, you'll just create a vegetation node. It's a color node and it needs 2 inputs. So first is of course our color map. I'm moving the pin. I just press F to set it here and then F again to reset it. It's a handy little shortcut. For the second input, it needs the actual height. This looks like a bug. This shouldn't happen. So I'm just going to delete this. It automatically tried to get that from somewhere. So I'm just going to go and give it a portal. So it's quite easy. We're just going to create a vegetation node. So Gaea will take care of the vegetation creation by itself. So I'll go ahead and create a vegetation node. So this node will help us add vegetation on top of our texture map. So right now it's connected to our color output from the combine, but the secondary input needs to be a height reference for how it should handle the slopes, and that for us will be again our erosion output, the original erosion. So we'll go portal and erosion. In fact, now that we have so many erosion nodes, I should go back and rename this as the final erosion, at least as far as the construction is concerned. So their final erosion, just a lot easier, because who knows, we might turn these into portals later. Okay, so the vegetation, let me show you what's going on. So you can see it's starting to add vegetation everywhere. And so we want to increase that a lot more. And the color that it's using is defined up here. This one is good enough for now. We can change it afterwards. I'm going to introduce a bit of chaos, because we don't want the vegetation growing too linearly. I'm going to increase the slope from bottom. So it means there's more influence towards the lower portions of slopes. Again, it's a heavy node, so I'm going to click apply. And for now, I'll just lock this again, because we're just at 1K, it's okay. So now you can see, because it's adding these dots at a nice density, from afar it starts looking more natural than, say, just a gradient. And I'll show you exactly what that would look like. So let's say if I were to, let me just save this in case I mess things up too much. I take this texture, I create another sat maps, and I'll switch to the green collection. This is nice. And now if I want to combine these two, what do I have to mask it? And if we use something like, say, a clipped Berlin noise, like we did with the Voronoi, so, oops, not clamp, but clip. So I'm using this and auto level, and then that's going to help create these. And that's not strong enough yet, so we probably have to do FX, where I can do logarithmic scaling on top. There. See, this is the problem. It doesn't look natural. There's a too soft a blend going on, and if we were to avoid that, it means we need to add more noise here. And again, the higher the resolution, even if there's like a soft drop off between 2 points that look noisy, it's going to create problems. So we don't have to do any of that. And we just use the vegetation node. And as you can see, this looks way more realistic, especially from afar. Because closer in, you will end up using other 3D models anyways. But from afar, because the actual base color peeks through a little bit, it sells the realism of it. So we can increase the density. So if I increase the density right now, you'll see the vegetation becomes denser. And we can even increase the occurrence so more trees grow. So density will control the thickness of the little pockets of vegetation, and the occurrence increases the occurrence of these pockets in the first place. So I will right click and select reset to default. So I think that's too dense for what we want. I'll go lower on the density as well. The scale changes the pattern scale for whatever color scheme we're applying. So let's say if I do this, it doesn't look good, but it'll give you an idea of the scale. You can see these patches become bigger. Since we are using a slightly more uniform looking color, it's not a big concern. If you were to go use something like, say this, even that's not showing up that much, because that's when, if you have something contrasty like this, and here is where scale is important. If we make it smaller, you can see the color patches become smaller. If we make it larger, then of course the color patches are a lot larger. Again, I'm just going to reset this, and the one up here, the default, number 4, it's a nice dark-ish color that's suitable for most environments. And so we're going to stick with that. Now let's look at our terrain again. Now compared to the snowy terrain that we worked on before, you can see this is a lot more sophisticated. If we reduce the slope a little bit, we get even more of the base texture, which is nice. It's like what you would expect from a rocky terrain like this. So let's leave it like that, and now let's bring in our water. So what I'll do is, with the vegetation, I am going to publish that out as a portal. And so we'll leave it here, and then we can either create a new tab or just stay here. This blue, and we'll make this purple. Now, before we start consuming the output from the lake, we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need the lake's output, so we have the boundary like we saw before. So I'll make that a port, and then I'll make the depth a portal, and of course the main lake's output, that's going to be a portal. The depth, though, let's also send it to an FX node. So we can auto level it. And I'm going to turn on the 2D view so we can see how it's going. And then this will add a warp node. So for that, I'll just turn off 3D so we can visualize it as 2D. We'll reduce the size quite a bit, because you can imagine if it's a river, it should have some sort of churn. I'm going to reduce the strength as well, and like before, increase the iterations. And because of the iterations, we get this nice undulating shape. We can increase the roughness. It adds a bit more level to this. And I think that is more or less good enough for now. We can also turn on min mode, so it respects the edges. Or you can turn on max mode and get like both. Although with this it's creating these bad ridges, so I'll skip max mode, and then min will come back to if we need it, because we're going to use the lakes mask for separating it. So anyways, let's go back here, and we'll just keep this separate. So I'm going to bring in, well, let's just create a combine. And it can consume the vegetation as well as, oh, we don't have any color for the lake, so let's do that first. So for that, I'll bring in a clutter, and let's feed that here. And for the mask, we'll give it the lakes mask. That's a mouthful. Say that 10 times. Okay, and for the clutter, of course, we need the depth. So we'll go give it the lake depth. And the reason we're not seeing any updates, this is pinned. This needs to be 3D. Oh, that's right. We haven't given it a color. No wonder. And also, we do have to go back and pin the lake now. So I'll select this and press G, so it's now pinned as the underlay. Now we can visualize this properly, because before we wanted to look at the valley, now we don't. So there, we need to turn this into a nice water system. So let's go to clutter, or rather I will pin us to the last node, the combine. And then let's go to clutter. So the outside, let's give it a nice dark blue of some sort, like this. And then inside we'll go with something lighter. Let's bring that in here. I'll add another point here and then make that white. Well, not too white, something like this. And if there's any adjustments we need to make, we can go back and make them here. So you can see this is deeper, so we get more of this here. I want to kind of avoid that if possible. So for that, we can bring this up. Or rather, I have actually inverted the map. So I will turn on reverse. No wonder it looked weird. So the deeper something is, the darker it should be. So we pull this out. This, again, we don't want it to be too white. Give it a color of shallow water of some sort. There, that's not too bad. So let's zoom out and see. So now we're getting that. And then we can even bring this in, because we don't want it to be that precise for where it's deep. Now this is still using the lake's depth, but we added this warp. We need to turn that into a portal. And I'll call this the warped water, just so I don't confuse it with something else. And then this, we can redirect to warp water. There we go. Now it's starting to look a lot better. And again, we'll adjust the points a little bit. So There, we can take advantage of the warped water. So now you can see in the coastal areas, and especially in this shallow part, we get different colors. And I'm seeing that this is a bit, the resolution is losing. So in this, the sample density is 256, and that's the procedural limit of how many colors it tries to create. So I'll increase that to 512. You can see that becomes softer. If at a higher resolution it needs to be even more so, then you can go to 1024. That looks nice, so we can keep that. So there, we now have this bay coming out into the main sound, and this entire river structure, or the water structure. So let me turn off the 2D view. Let's take a look. And let's rebuild this at 2K. So now, this you can see at 2K, we get a lot more detail. So let's go inspect our mineral flows first. So we have the patch here, and then we have another patch here, some stuff here. Oh, this got merged into the water a bit, but we also have some stuff here, and of course here. So it took a moment to build at 2K because, of course, we have a bunch of different nodes. And if you want to look at how to optimize certain things, so there's the build time down here. So it took 51 seconds to rebuild this at 2K. So if you click that, it'll tell you where you're spending your time. So you can see texture is one of the nodes that's taking a lot of time, and that can be improved. We could combine a few different things. Although it's not too bad, and everything else you can see is pretty fast. In fact, the last 30 nodes combined take just 19 seconds, and you can get other statistics here. So anyways, this is now ready for export. We can mark out the stuff that we want to export, like the masks for the lake, the different color maps, and so on, and this can be ready to go. You just add a bit of aerial perspective, certain volumetrics, and this should be ready for a good VFX shot, or you can put it in your game. Well, let's say you want multiple terrains like this. Maybe you want to give your art director options, or you just need to have several different assets that are just like this. For that, you can just randomize everything. So what I'll do is I'll unselect any node, go down here where we have the mutate button. And before that, I'll save this just in case, because we will want to come back to this. And then I'll press mutate nodes. So it'll warn me that it's going to change the seeds of everything, and you can hold down shift to skip this warning. And then I'll press yes, and it'll start doing everything. And it took a while to rebuild because this has a stronger slope now. But we have a new version. The reason we're not seeing any color is if I go down to water production, we might have a bit too much water. That's good. Let's come back here. Oh, there, it refreshed. So we now have a completely new terrain. It has some of the similar features, and if we go back to combine minerals, you can see we have that going on as well. In fact, let's see, if we go here and reduce the precipitation, the water body will become smaller. And then go back to our final combine. I'll let it rebuild. There we can see more of the color. So now we have a full variation, and I'll go and save this as a new file. Or I could go try different shapes. Now, if you want to try this quickly, the easiest way to do this is go down to 512. This is where everything will become very fast. You may not get to see too much detail, but it's a great way to check out different shapes. Okay, so you can see this just rebuilt in 13 seconds. So this shape is nice. Let's see what else we can get. So I'll just mutate again. And we have yet another terrain. Now, because the placement of the faults is manual, we may have to change it. It's just like if we had masks for the different minerals, we would have to change that because it's a position thing. But beyond that, you're immediately going to get a few different variations. Now, if you wanted to output a bunch of these and not have to wait to build them one by one, you can just go to the Build tab and set up your outputs like you would. And in the additional options, you can go to Mutations and select the number of mutations you want, and it'll output all of them. And it'll also create a new .tor file with that variation, so you can go in and manually tweak it. If you just want to create a bunch of variations and tweak them separately, you don't want to worry about too much about the build itself, then just set this to 1K, which will be a lot faster than 2K. But this is a great way to explore different potential for that terrain that you've created. And at any point, you can go in and change any element. Like you could change the base element, or like I mentioned, if this fault is not working, you can go and we can change the position. We can change the position of the other one as well. Or this time we could just not shrink it, have it be like so. And let it erode again, and we can go and on and on and on, and then we can create this water body and so forth. So with this, you now have a fantastic way of creating lots of different terrains, and this will also give you a good idea of the way a procedurally generated terrain can help, where you can go in and change just a few elements and the rest can be done for you. So you have the original source files for these projects, so you can open them up, see how it was constructed, and you can make modifications, get a feel for how such a workflow might work, and you can even just go ahead and change the base element. Like instead of the ridge, you can have a single mountain or any other different shape.